I stepped through the front door, dripping from the rain, water sliding off my jacket and pooling on their perfect floor. My hands were shaking from the cold by the time I hit the living room, the kind of place that looked more like a museum than a home. The chandelier alone probably cost more than my old pickup truck. Miranda's voice cut through the quiet like a hiss. She said my name the way people talk to a stray mutt that somehow slipped past security. "Tyler," she muttered, sharp and low, glancing at the marble tiles like I had just tracked in mud. "You are drenched," she said, disgust curling around every word. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. Victoria, smiling at some guy in a navy blue suit, reached over and pinched my elbow. That fake, polite kind of touch people use when they are embarrassed by you. "Let us not make a scene," she whispered through her teeth, her diamond rings flashing like headlights. Richard was standing by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in one hand, surrounded by a few men in tuxedos who laughed at whatever joke he had just told. Without even looking my way, he said, "Let us take this to the study." I followed him down the hall, feeling like I was walking into a courtroom. "Our daughter collapsed," I said before he could close the door. "The doctor says it is a congenital heart defect. She needs surgery within 48 hours, and they want a deposit before they will even schedule it." That was the first time he turned to look at me. "How much is the deposit?" he asked. 38,200, I said. He sighed, long and heavy, like I had asked to borrow his boat for the weekend. "That is terrible timing," he said, heading toward his desk. "I already wired 175,000 to Preston's wedding coordinator. Vale and the Tahiti, non-refundable." Preston was leaning against the doorway, tuxedo jacket hanging off one shoulder, hair slicked back like a cheap imitation of Gatsby. "Have you tried Kickstarter?" he asked with that smug grin of his. That is what regular people do these days. I stared at him a second too long. His grin only widened. Then Miranda appeared again, her voice tight, her tone rehearsed. "This is not the right time, Tyler. You cannot just hijack Preston's engagement party. Honestly, the fact that you do not have health insurance is embarrassing." I just stood there, soaking wet, silent. "You made your choices," she added. "You have to live with them." That was when I took off the Rolex watch they had given me last Christmas, the one I'd barely worn 3 times, and set it down on Richard's desk. "You can have this back," I said. "Emma is not a bill you get to skip." Victoria appeared in the doorway again, a glass of white wine in hand, her voice soft and detached. "We can regroup after the weekend," she said. Richard was already scrolling through his phone, not even pretending to listen. I stood there, still dripping, still shaking, but it was not from the rain anymore. Nobody said a word, so I turned and walked out, past the caterers with their silver trays, past the string quartet, past the champagne tower built for Preston like he was some kind of prince. Outside, the rain had stopped, but my boots squelched with every step down the stone path. I pulled out my phone, typed a message to the surgeon, working on it. Then I hit send. Right there, on their perfect front steps, I made myself a promise. I would never ask that house for help again. I was still standing in their driveway when the porch light flickered, half burned out, casting a weak yellow glow over me. I stood under it, dripping onto the concrete, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. By 3:47 in the morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a notebook, my phone, and a mug of cold coffee that had gone bitter hours ago. I called 3 banks, 2 credit unions, even my old union rep from back when I was doing drywall for school projects. Every call sounded the same. Polite voices, rehearsed sympathy, and no actual help. No collateral? "I am sorry, sir, we cannot approve a rush loan without assets." "I understand your urgency, Mr. Avery, but exceptions like this are not standard practice. Cute kids do not count as collateral." I hung up and just stared at the refrigerator, like maybe it would open and start spitting out cash. Then I called the last number on my list. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I did not bother leaving a message. By 5:30 in the morning, I was parked in front of a guy's house in Marysville, signing over the title to my 1997 Cherokee. He handed me $1,150 in cash. I did not ask questions. After that, I drove back to Everett, loaded my cabinet saw into a borrowed truck, and sold it to a woodworker in Linwood for $1,450. Then I walked into a pawn shop with my framing nailer. The guy behind the counter, could not have been more than 23, had fake military patches stitched all over his vest. He looked at the tool like it was a broken toaster. $275, he said. I took it without arguing. By the end of that morning, I had scraped together a little over $10,000, and somehow it still felt like I was drowning. Then I called Kyle. We had worked side by side building houses for nearly 9 years. He was one of the first to throw me a job when I went out on my own. He picked up right away. "You sound like hell," he said. "I need cash." I told him, fast. He did not even ask why. "I could float you," he said, "but I would need a piece, just short term, maybe 12% of the company, 15 tops, just for protection." "Jesus, Kyle, it is business, man, not personal," he said. "I know it is for Emma, but I have got to look out for myself too." I told him to shove it and hung up. 10 minutes later, I called him back and apologized. He accepted it, but I still said no to the deal. By 6:15 that morning, I was back in my kitchen, leaning hard against the counter like it was the only thing holding me upright, when I heard a knock. It was light. Cautious, almost guilty. I opened the door, and there they were. My dad stood in his work coat, hat in his hands. My mom had her hair pinned tight, the way she always did when she was bracing for something heavy. Dad stepped inside slowly and took off his hat like we were paying respects at a gravesite. Neither of them said a word at first. Mom walked straight to the coffee table, pulled a thick manila envelope from her purse, and dropped it onto the wood. It landed with a flat, solid slap. "We sold the fifth wheel," she said. I blinked. "What?" "The trailer," she repeated, calm but tired. "The big one. Hauled it out to Wenatchee last week. Your father sold the bass boat, too." My mouth hung open, but no words came out. "There's $38,200 in there," Dad said finally, his eyes fixed on that envelope like it might catch fire. "Some in cash, the rest cashier's checks. Should cover what you need." "I can't take that," I said, shaking my head. "You can argue about pride," he said without looking at me, "or you can schedule your daughter's surgery. Your call, son?" That was it. I sat down. I did not cry, and I did not say thank you. I just nodded once, picked up the envelope, and held it like something fragile. By 7:45, the hospital billing office was open, and I was their first call. The woman who answered had that cold, careful voice, the kind that sounded practiced from years of delivering bad news. "I have the payment," I said. "Cash and check, $38,200. There was a pause, a small click of silence. Then her tone shifted, lighter now. "We can schedule her for 2:15 tomorrow afternoon," she said. "She's in." I stayed standing there, leaning on the counter, knees weak. That money covered the deposit. Insurance and a payment plan would take care of the rest. The future could wait its turn. Right now, I had one job: get Emma into that operating room. I grabbed my phone and sent Miranda a text. Surgery scheduled. Deposit paid. A few seconds later, her reply came through, a single thumbs up emoji. Then another message right after: "Please do not start drama in the family chat." That was it. No thank you, no how, no I will be there. Just that. I stared at the screen for a while, then put the phone down. I did not trust myself to say anything that would not burn bridges to the ground. I sat in the hallway with the envelope in my lap, still warm from my mom's hands. Mine were black with grease from pawn tools and dust from the road. I looked around our half-finished house, the one we were supposed to build a life in, and it hit me how thin the walls really were. No backup, no savings, no cushion. Just stubbornness, duct tape, and the kind of parents who sell their boat when it actually matters. At the hospital, I sat in that waiting room, feeling like my insides had been scraped out and replaced with worry. The coffee they served tasted burnt and metallic, like hot pennies and dust. But I drank it anyway, just to keep my hands busy. Emma's stuffed rabbit sat in my lap, one ear chewed flat from when she was teething. The nurse told me most kids bring something within them into surgery, a little shield against the world. I did not argue. I just held it like it was something sacred. Miranda showed up around 10:15, looking like she had walked straight off a magazine cover. Perfect lipstick, hair set, heels clicking sharp against the tile. She sat across from me and never touched her coffee. Barely spoke. Most of the time, she used her phone camera as a mirror, checking her makeup, fixing stray hairs. Then she posted something online. I caught a glimpse before she turned the screen. It was that family emergency prayers up post everyone loves to share. The photo wasn't even of Emma. It was from her parents' party 2 nights ago. She stood up without saying goodbye, straightened her skirt, and said, "Text me if anything changes," before walking away. My dad, Frank, stayed beside me for 12 straight hours. Never said a word. Just sat there with his elbows on his knees, his back curved like a man deep in prayer. Every time a nurse passed through the hall, he looked up quick, then went still again. He did not eat, did not move much. That was how he loved, not through words, but through staying. Mom came by after dark carrying a small Tupperware with a piece of tape across the top that read, "Emma's dad." I told her I was not hungry. She said, "I know," and handed it to the night nurse anyway. Around 11:45, I made the mistake of checking my phone. A new message from Preston. A selfie. He was sitting in some beach cabana, shirt half open, champagne in hand, captioned, "Hang in there, champ." I turned the phone face down and stared at the tile grout until my eyes burned. My hands were shaking again. I squeezed that stuffed rabbit until my fingers hurt. It was close to midnight when the surgeon finally came out. He looked wrecked, eyes bloodshot, surgical cap still on, voice rough with exhaustion. He did not waste time with small talk. "She's stable," he said. "We fixed what needed fixing." My legs gave out, and I dropped into the nearest chair before I even realized I was falling. The sound that came out of me wasn't joy. It wasn't relief either. It was more like something deflating, air leaking out of a body that had been stretched too far for too long. "She's in recovery," the surgeon said quietly. "You'll be able to see her soon." I nodded, but words wouldn't come. My throat locked up. Dad placed his hand on my shoulder, gave one short, firm squeeze, and that was enough. That's how he said, "I'm proud of you," or "I'm here." Before I could even stand up, my phone started buzzing. Miranda. Her name lit the screen, and for a second I thought maybe she was going to say something real, maybe even thank me. Instead, the first words out of her mouth were, "Will the hospital send me the itemized bill directly, or do I need to request it?" I stayed quiet. "I'm asking," she went on, her tone cool as glass, "because if the debt falls under your side of the finances, I don't want it dragging me down. We should probably talk to someone about legal separation, just to protect me and Emma long term." I looked at my dad. He met my eyes like he was ready to rip the phone out of my hand and throw it through the nearest wall. "Okay," I said finally. Not because I agreed, not because I forgave her, just because I was done fighting. Tired all the way through. Bone deep. Our little girl was alive. That was all I had space for. Miranda hung up without a goodbye. Half an hour later, the nurse took me back to recovery. Emma was hooked up to more machines than I could count, her face smaller and paler than I'd ever seen it, but her chest rose and fell. She was breathing. Her fingers twitched under the blanket, the tiniest movement, but it was enough. She was still here. I sat next to her bed and tucked her stuffed rabbit beside her. One of the nurses had clipped a tiny oxygen monitor to the toy's ear, and I almost laughed, except my throat ached too much. "Hey, baby girl," I whispered. "You did it." She couldn't answer, but I leaned close and promised her something I meant with everything I had left in me. "I swear, Emma, I will never be this broke or this helpless again." And I meant it. Not just about the money. I meant I would never again crawl to people who thought family meant cocktail parties and photo ops. Never again would I sit outside an operating room while someone who shared her blood walked away because the lighting wasn't flattering. She made it through. I got her that far. Now it was on me to make the rest of her life worth every step. When I got home from the hospital, I didn't sleep. Not even for a minute. I just stood guard, sat beside her bed like a sentry, even after the machines were unplugged and the nurses said she was stable. Her breathing was soft and steady. Her hair stuck to her forehead in little damp curls. Every now and then her hand would find my thumb in her sleep and squeeze, like she remembered something her body hadn't forgotten. When she started eating again, I started moving. I picked up my tool belt like it was a weapon and went back to work with something burning inside me. Not hope, not ambition. Pressure. Pure, heavy pressure not to ever feel powerless again. So I started saying yes to jobs that should have scared me off. Big ones. Risky ones. The kind of work that could chew you up if you blinked. That's how I ended up in a video meeting with 6 executives from Cascade Hospitality, faces in little squares on a laptop screen, staring at me like I was out of my depth. 6 boutique inns, they said, scattered from the Skagit Valley down to Salem, full renovation and redesign. First phase valued at $2.4 million. I had never even touched a project that size. Might as well have been pitching NASA. But I told myself what I always told Emma before every one of her procedures. You don't have to be the biggest, just the one who doesn't give up. The man in the center box. I think he was the chief financial officer, leaned back in his chair and asked flat out, how does a 4-person crew plan to manage a full-scale refurbishment on 6 active properties? I didn't blink. I don't build for pictures, I said. I build for people who are tired and need to breathe again. He blinked instead. The human resources woman beside him started jotting something down. Then I shared my screen and pulled up photos of the bungalow I'd rebuilt for my parents. The one they moved into after selling their 5th wheel and their boat to save my daughter's life. I showed them the kitchen with the lowered counters so Mom didn't have to reach for a single cabinet. The mudroom bench where Dad sits every morning to lace up his boots. I told them how we widened the entry so he wouldn't have to shove the door open with his shoulder when he came home carrying groceries. You give me this contract, I said, and I'll make you a promise. Every person who swings a hammer on your sites gets health insurance starting day 1. No small print, no 60-day waiting period, no human resources maze. Day 1. The chief financial officer glanced at his watch, probably thinking I was wasting their time. But the woman from marketing, the one who hadn't said a word all meeting, stopped tapping her pen when I held up a drawing to the camera. It was a sketch of a lobby, nothing fancy, comfortable chairs, no fake greenery. A quiet corner meant to actually be quiet, not just look it. Real. I know I don't look like much on paper, I said, but paper didn't build this company. Stories did. Some families pay for centerpieces. Others sell their boats. I'm the kind of builder who knows which story matters. Silence followed. Just screens, blinking cursors, and unreadable faces. Then the meeting ended. No promises. No feedback. Just the quiet click of disconnection. The meeting ended with that awkward video call chime and a spinning wheel that felt like judgment. For a minute, I just sat there staring at the empty screen, convinced I'd tanked it completely. I went outside to clear my head and ended up fixing Emma's birdhouse. The perch was cracked and the roof leaned like it had given up. It didn't matter. I needed to build something that day. Something small, something I could actually finish, not another job worth $2 million. Next morning, I packed up before sunrise and drove to Linwood to finish a flooring project. My knees screamed from crouching so long, but I kept at it. I didn't look at my phone. I wasn't waiting for a miracle. I was just working like a man who had already learned what it cost to wait for one. That night, when Emma asked if her birdhouse was fixed, I told her, yeah, roof's tight, new perch, good as new. She smiled, sleepy and soft, her little arms still marked with bruises from the IVs. Can we paint it? She asked. Tomorrow, I said. You can be the paint boss. She grinned at the title like it was some kind of royal appointment, and right then I wanted that Cascade Hospitality job more than I'd ever wanted anything. Not for the paycheck. Not for the name. For her. Because if I got that job, I'd never have to ask anyone for help again. Especially not people who needed marble floors and champagne glasses to feel like they cared. 3 days later, while I was eating cereal at the counter, still wearing my work boots, an email came through. Subject line, Notice of Award. I didn't open it right away, just stared at it like it might explode. Emma sat across from me, swinging her legs and chewing on a marker cap. Can I be the paint boss? She asked. Even for the big buildings? I clicked it open, skimmed once, then again slower. The words sank in, and I leaned back hard enough for the chair to creak. You're hired, I said. Paint boss. Official. She threw her fist in the air like she'd just won a championship and started scribbling her favorite colors on a napkin. I sat there watching her, realizing I just landed the biggest job of my life, and somehow my daughter thought it made her the boss. I didn't correct her. That afternoon, I called the crew, Jesse and Ryan, and told them it was time to grow. Fast. We'd need real help, real equipment, real structure. I told my accountant we were done running like a garage operation. No more hiring guys who fix their cousin's truck between jobs. Then I drove over to my parents' place, handed Dad a folded paper with 2 fishing license receipts inside. Yours and Mom's, I said. No expiration. You fish when you want. That's the deal now. He tried to mutter something about inflation, but Mom was already crying before she finished reading the dates. That night, Miranda texted to say she'd be staying with her parents for a while. A second message followed, a PDF drafted by her mother's lawyer. A post-nuptial agreement. Clauses, terms, all the usual armor rich folks wrap around themselves when affection starts costing too much. I read every line, then deleted it. Didn't respond. Didn't sign. The next day, Kyle showed up at my office with a bottle of scotch and that salesman grin he wears when he's already counted your money. You finally swung big, he said, setting the bottle down like it was part of the contract. Now we scale. Bring in serious investors. Maybe Montgomery money? I kept reading the insulation bids like the man wasn't even there. Come on, he said. You know Richard would jump at this if you showed him the numbers. It's time to level up, Tyler. You don't have to build everything the hard way anymore. I turned to him slowly. If Richard wanted to invest, I said, he could have done it the night I walked in dripping wet with his watch in my hand. That's when this company needed help. Kyle frowned. You're letting emotion run your business. This isn't about payback, man. It's business. No, I said quietly. It's both. I didn't throw him out, but I didn't open the scotch either. After that, we started hiring. Fast, but careful. 5 apprentices came on from the local technical high school that month. Kids straight out of shop class. No bad habits yet. One of them, Carlos, was 18 and could cut crown molding cleaner than most men twice his age. He had that calm precision that comes from growing up around sawdust and hammers. Always kept a pencil tucked behind his ear like it belonged there. I put him on the Cascade Hospitality lobby project right away. First week on site, we got slammed. Plumbing inspection Monday, electrical Tuesday, structural Friday. Santos, the city inspector, didn't play games. She walked the job like her boots were bolted to the ground, clipboard tight in hand. No time for excuses. She caught small stuff, but she was fair. You're not used to projects this size, she said during her second walkthrough. Fair, I told her, but you listen. She nodded once. Also fair. Saturday morning, she showed up again. Only this time, no badge, just jeans and a hoodie. She knocked on the trailer door at the site and pointed straight at one of our subcontractors. That guy cuts corners, she said flatly. He's got 3 violations on record. He's and fire him before he wrecks your profit. I fired him that same night. Later, I was back at the kitchen table surrounded by stacks of invoices and estimate sheets. Emma sat beside me with her crayons and a pile of superhero stickers spread across the table. Every once in a while, her collar would slip, and I'd catch a glimpse of the thin scar down her chest. Just a faint line now, but to me it was a compass. Every time I saw it, I thought of that night I walked out of the lake house soaked and shaking. That scar reminded me what all this was for. Why I kept turning down money that came with strings attached and men in suits who talked about families like balance sheets. Dad? Emma said, tapping my hand. Do we own the paint store now? Not yet, I told her. But I got you a budget. She laughed and went back to drawing, a purple hotel with hearts in every window. We'd just finished our second Cascade Hospitality property in the Skagit Valley when the article dropped. I didn't even know it was coming until Ryan, my foreman, walked over holding his phone out. You seen this yet? He asked. I took it from him and read the headline across the top. Builds that heel. The contractor turning pain into purpose. Halfway down the piece, there it was. My quote. Just one line, printed in bold. My in-laws picked a party over my kid, and that's when I changed. Out of everything I'd said, that was the one they pulled. By noon, it was everywhere. Local reposts, then Olympia outlets, then a regional podcast. By the next morning, producers from shows I'd only ever seen playing in hospital waiting rooms were filling my inbox. Daytime interviews, public radio, one national feature. I turned most of them down. Said yes to a few. But I made one thing clear every time. The story was about Emma and the crew. Not me. Not the drama. Not some feel-good, hero dad nonsense. I didn't want pity. I wanted people to understand what it meant when some families sold their boats while others sipped champagne. I knew it might scare off a few future clients, maybe even tick off someone at the permit office. But I did it anyway. Telling the truth had already cost me enough. I figured it was time it paid something back. 3 days later, I got a direct message from Nicole, Preston's wife. It was short and to the point. I thought you should see this. She attached screenshots, a bank portal showing a full refund on the Vail wedding package dated early July, about 7 weeks after that party, the same time I was pawning my tools and selling my Cherokee. Another image showed Preston's name on a purchase agreement, a 24-foot wake boat bought July 18th. Nicole wrote, "He told me the wedding coordinator had a no-refund policy. Turns out she gave him a full refund and a loyalty discount. He used the money to buy a toy. I'm filing. Once you see a man clearly, you can't unsee it." I stared at that message for a long while, not sure what to say. Finally, I typed, "I'm sorry." "And I mean that." She replied a minute later, "I know." That was all. A few days after that, my accountant came by and dropped a thick manila folder on my desk. "You're going to want to read this sitting down," he said. Inside were printed emails, Kyle's name all over the headers. The messages were addressed to Richard Montgomery. He'd been offering to funnel Cascade Hospitality's next phase into a new shell company he'd quietly registered behind my back, for a cut, of course. The subject line, leverage. I sat there for a full minute, still as stone. Then I buzzed the front desk and told them not to let Kyle leave the building. 5 minutes later, he strolled in like it was any other Tuesday, smiling like we were about to talk fixtures or head counts. I closed the office door and stayed on my feet. "Who the hell are you?" I asked. He blinked, lifted his hands like I was overreacting. "Look, it's not what you think. It's strategy, long-term positioning. You went behind my back," I said. To Richard, the same man who watched me beg for help for my kid and said no because he'd already wired a wedding deposit. "It was just a conversation," Kyle said. "You're getting emotional again." Wrong words. I opened the folder and slid it across the table. "That's your email. That's your name. That's the new company you filed using my license." He went silent. "I'm firing you," I said finally. "Effective immediately. The paperwork's already filed." He blinked, pale. "You can't do that." "I can," I said. "And if you push it, I'll forward those emails to the state board and let your strategic partners explain what a licensing fraud charge does to us to a subcontractor's career." He opened his mouth to argue. I didn't give him the chance. I picked up my phone, put it on speaker, and dialed my lawyer. Let it ring. No words. Just the sound of the tone until the voicemail kicked in. "Thought so," Kyle muttered, and walked out without touching the bottle of scotch he'd left on my shelf 3 months before. That night, I drove out to the Cascade Hospitality site in Salem. I just needed air that didn't smell like betrayal. Of all people, Emma's surgeon was there. Said he'd read the article and wanted to stop by. "I wanted to see what you built," he told me. "Looks like a man turned a corner." I shook his hand and nodded, too choked up to respond. That one sentence hit harder than I expected. Later that same night, Miranda posted one of her cryptic Instagram stories, a stock photo of clasped hands with the caption, "I stand with families." A text followed right after. "Can you take that article down? It makes everyone look bad." I read it twice, set the phone face down on the workbench, and left it there. I didn't respond, didn't need to. The following Monday, I signed a lease on a building in Bellingham. It was nothing fancy. Old brick, creaky floors, wires half exposed. But it had good bones. We painted the front door red before the electric was even fully hooked up and hung our name over the entry. "We're not waiting to look legitimate," I told the crew. "We build it. Then we become it." We opened in April, hired locals, brought on every apprentice full-time with the same deal as the senior guys. Health insurance from day one. No fine print, no waiting period, no bait and switch. Even when the bids came in high, I held the line, because I remembered what it felt like sitting in a hospital chair wondering how the hell to pay for my daughter's surgery. By September, we'd launched a second shop in Portland. Same model, same red door, same promise. Word started to spread. If you swing a hammer for us, you matter. That's when I started the Emma Fund. I didn't want some glossy PR campaign or charity gala. I just wanted to make sure no father like me ever had to pawn his tools or sell his truck to save his child's life. We held our first fundraiser inside a half-gutted community center we were renovating. Folding chairs, cheap pizza, a donation bucket passed hand to hand. Some people wrote checks. Others dropped in $20 bills. By the end of the night, we had enough to fund 10 surgeries. Dad took the microphone after we announced the total. Tried to thank everyone, but his voice cracked halfway through. He rubbed his eye, cleared his throat, and said, "We couldn't save the boat, but we saved her. That's what matters." People clapped until he had to sit down. He reached for Mom's hand like he was 18 again. I had to take the mic from him before he completely lost it. A week later, Miranda asked to meet just to talk. We met at a cafe she chose, white subway tile, green matcha, prices that made no sense. She didn't ask how Emma was doing. She just took out her phone. "I thought maybe we could take a few photos," she said. "You and her. I could post something supportive, show people we're on good terms." I didn't get mad. I just said, "We can co-parent Miranda, but keep her off your social feed." She looked like she wanted to argue, then decided not to. We finished our drinks without another word. Not long after, word got around that Preston had lost his promotion. Someone in his firm had forwarded the wakeboat receipt to Human Resources. The timestamp didn't match the no refund story he'd told. I hadn't sent it. I hadn't even thought about it since Nicole's message. But when someone from his office called to confirm the timeline of the wedding payments, I told them the truth. Nothing more. Nothing less. When I heard he got passed over, I didn't celebrate, didn't feel satisfaction or guilt. It was just the world correcting itself, consequences doing their job. The Montgomery family business started slipping soon after. Cheaper online competitors undercut their contracts. Orders slowed. Clients walked. Victoria probably never balanced a spreadsheet in her life, but the tide doesn't care about last names, doesn't care about designer empathy either. That same year, I bought my parents a small A-frame cabin on Lake Tapps. Nothing extravagant, just a dock, a fire pit, and enough stillness to hear yourself think. Dad mounted his old fishing lures on a wooden board in the mudroom like they were medals. Told Emma every one of them had a story. She made him retell each one 3 times. "Is this the one you caught the snapping turtle with?" she asked. "No, that was the red popper," he said. "This one caught a lawn chair." They both laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Carlos graduated that spring and came on full-time. On his first official day, he asked if the Emma Fund could name a grant after his little sister, Sophia, who had passed 3 years earlier from the same heart defect. "She would have loved this place," he said, rubbing his palm with his thumb. "We'll name the next one after her," I told him. "And the one after that." And it felt right. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with supplier orders spread out in front of me while Emma colored in one of her comic books beside me. Every now and then she reached for a crayon, and her shirt collar shifted just enough for me to see the thin scar on her chest. She caught me looking. "It doesn't hurt," she said casually. "I forget it's there." "I don't," I told her. She smiled a little and went right back to coloring. Later, when I finally lay down, I slept, really slept. Not the kind where exhaustion knocks you out cold. Not the kind where you wake up still clenched, mind racing through what bills might bounce next week. Just normal, quiet sleep. The kind where your body isn't waiting for the next blow. No dreams. No late-night emails. No replaying old arguments. Just stillness. The next morning, my assistant buzzed the intercom. "Richard and Victoria Montgomery are in the lobby." I didn't flinch, didn't sigh, just said, "Send them in," and kept my hands flat on the desk so I wouldn't curl them into fists. They came in slowly, careful, deliberate steps like they were moving through a minefield. Richard wore a blazer that didn't fit right, too tight at the shoulders, sleeves riding up his wrists. Victoria was dressed in beige from head to toe, holding a designer bag that tried too hard to look expensive. But money had already left the building. I could see that plain as day. Neither of them sat. "We didn't want to do this here," Richard said, smoothing a hand over the back of the chair like touching it might count as humility. "But we're out of time," Victoria added, her voice polished but worn thin. Richard cleared his throat. "The bank's taking the house. Maybe next month. Maybe sooner. We need $142,600 to make it right." He still couldn't look me in the eye. "We figured family sticks together in hard times." I let the silence hang, long enough for them to feel it. Then I tapped my phone, scrolled to a saved voicemail, and pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room, cold and crisp. Tyler is irresponsible. It's not our job to rescue people who make poor financial choices. Then Richard's voice followed. We have our own priorities. I let it run to the beep before setting the phone down on the desk like a piece of evidence. Do either of you know what color Emma's rabbit is? I asked, looking right at them. Victoria blinked, confused. What? The rabbit, I said. The stuffed one she held going into surgery. Do you know what color it is? Nothing. Did either of you come see her after the surgery? I asked. Not the next day? Not the next week? Ever? Still silence. I reached into my drawer, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the desk. Inside was a cashier's check for $142,600 with a printed transfer receipt on top. Richard stared at it like it might bite him. His hand trembled when he picked it up. This isn't forgiveness, I said. This is me buying my peace. After this, we're done. They both nodded, almost perfectly in sync, like they'd practiced the gesture in the car before walking in. Richard slipped the check back into the envelope, careful, almost reverent, as if creasing it wrong might cost him the last bit of pride he still had. Victoria opened her mouth. I always meant well, Tyler. I know it doesn't seem like it, but... Save it, I said, cutting her off. Spend those words on someone who needs them. I've got a meeting. She shut her mouth and gave a small, helpless nod. Then they turned and left, quiet as ghosts. When the door clicked shut behind them, I just stood there. The hum of the building filled the silence, phones ringing down the hall, footsteps echoing off tile, the air system clicking on overhead. I let it all sink in. For the first time since that night, I stood drenched on their marble steps. Something in my chest eased. Not a cinematic swell of relief, just an unclenching. A quiet space where anger had lived for years. I sat down and looked at the chair across from me. The one Richard couldn't bring himself to sit in, and then I reopened my laptop. Unpaused the meeting reminder I'd snoozed when they arrived. Business didn't stop just because someone else was finally learning what consequences feel like. The company picnic came a few weeks later, first warm Saturday of spring. Out at Silver Lake, under a sky so clear it looked painted. We rented the pavilion, hung a cheap banner, and made sure every kid got a t-shirt and a fishing pole, whether their parents ran payroll or poured concrete, no exceptions. No hierarchy. Dad sat up by the water with a folding chair and a cooler full of sodas, showing half the crew's kids how to tie a clinch knot. He didn't say much, just pointed, demonstrated, and waited while they tried to copy him. That was how he taught. Quiet, patient, solid. And for the first time in a long time, everything around me felt steady. Not perfect, just steady. When the kids tied their knots wrong, Dad never corrected them harshly. He'd just nod once and say, "Yep, now do it again." That was his version of praise. Patient, steady, the kind that teaches without words. Emma sat cross-legged beside him in the grass, looping and re-looping her fishing line until her fingers turned red. After lunch, she caught me off guard. Why do I have one set of grandparents who come to everything, she asked, and another set that never does? The sunlight hit her face just right. Bright, serious, too grown for her age. I said, because some people show up, and that's the kind that counts. She nodded once, no follow-up questions, and right then I knew she was going to be all right. She wasn't waiting for anyone to change anymore. Miranda and I had settled custody the quiet way. No courts, no lawyers, no shouting, just a calendar taped to the fridge and 2 phones that kept things polite. She'd opened a salon a couple towns over, started posting less, stopped sending me screenshots every time my name showed up online. We never signed the post-nup, never needed to. Once everything centered back on Emma, the rest of the noise faded on its own. I heard Kyle landed at a small shop in Beaverton. Low-budget operation, mostly finishing work. When people asked why we weren't partners anymore, I didn't bring up the emails or the shell company. I just said, we took different roads and left it there. Let folks invent their own versions of the story. Santos came to the picnic, which honestly surprised me. She showed up with her son, 9, maybe 10, carrying a tackle box covered in dinosaur stickers. She handed me a soda and said, "You built a crew that actually gives a damn. That's rare in this trade." I told her, "You gave me a real shot when you could have buried me. I never forgot that." She smiled, then walked back to the shoreline where her boy was trying to bait a hook upside down. A few days later, I got an email from a realtor. No message, just a link. I clicked it. The Montgomery Mansion, 12,000 square feet, needs updating. The note said motivated seller in bold. I stared for maybe half a minute, then closed the tab, didn't forward it, didn't screenshot it, didn't say a single word. It wasn't my fire to start. I had better things to build. That night, Emma set her little keyboard on the picnic table and played Lean on Me. Slow and proud, missed a few notes, but nobody cared. The sound carried across the park, soft and imperfect, and people just stopped. Fishing poles stilled midair, conversations trailed off, phones went dark. For those 2 minutes, everything was still. On the drive home, she fell asleep in the back seat, head turned toward the window. There was a streak of marshmallow on her cheek from the s'mores station, grass stains on her shirt, and one shoelace tied shorter than the other. Her scar showed just above the collar. I looked at her in the rearview mirror and thought, This is the life I was supposed to build. Now I'm 58, telling you this from a backyard that smells like charcoal and sunscreen. But back then, I was 34, still green, still dumb enough to think family was just bloodlines and last names. Turns out it's not. Family's a verb. Something you do or you don't. Dad stood at my grill wearing his old Seahawks cap, showing Maya, my 7-year-old granddaughter, how to flip a burger without pressing out the juice. She looked up at him like he was teaching rocket science, then said, "Dead serious, Mom says you have to let it sizzle longer or it cries." He laughed so hard he almost dropped the spatula. "Well, I guess I've been making emotional burgers my whole life," he said. Inside, Mom and her church friend Dorothy were in a full-blown debate about potato salad. Celery seed versus no celery seed, like the fate of humanity depended on it. I didn't argue. I just let them win. I like peace, and I like eating. By the time you've buried a few, you learn which hills are worth dying on. Carlos came through the back gate carrying a box of kites, his little boy trailing behind with paint on his cheek. Right behind them was Santos, folding chair in one hand, cooler in the other. She picked a spot under the oak tree like she owned the place. And honestly, she kind of did. None of this would have existed without her giving me that first shot. The rest of the crew trickled in one by one. Some brought their families, some just came solo with store-bought cookies or a six-pack. Nobody showed up empty-handed. That was our only rule. Halfway through the afternoon, Miranda appeared by the fence holding a foil-wrapped cake pan. "Chocolate," she said, "Emma's favorite." I walked over, took it from her. "Appreciate it." She nodded. "I won't stay." "You're welcome to," I said. She gave a small smile. Not quite happy, not quite sad. "This works better." And she was right. We'd figured out how to be decent without being anything else. And that was enough. Emma ran over, grabbed the cake, hugged her mom quick, and bolted back to the porch without looking back. No hesitation. Just comfort. The kind that comes when the hard parts are already behind you. Inside the hallway, near the family photos, there's a plaque hanging for the Emma Fund. It's covered with names now. People I've met, and plenty I haven't. 12 more kids got their surgeries this past spring, and our crew built porches for every one of their families, no charge. One mom mailed me a thank you card with her kids' drawing, a heart holding a hammer. It's still pinned to the corkboard in the office. Nicole still sends us a Christmas card every year. Her boy's getting taller, wild hair, missing teeth, joy all over his face. Preston isn't in the pictures. I don't ask. I don't go looking for ghosts. For a long time, I thought the turning point was that day I handed Richard the check, the way his fingers shook, how the color drained right out of his pride. But that wasn't it. The real shift came the next morning, when I laced up my boots and went to work like a man who wasn't angry anymore. Maya came running up from the yard with a crayon drawing clutched in her hands. "Look," she said, holding it out like treasure. "This is our family." 6 stick figures and a dog with sunglasses. She pointed one by one. "Grandma, Grandpa, Mommy, me, Emma, and that one's you." I laughed. "What's on my arms?" "Muscles," she said proudly. I taped it right on the fridge next to the inspection permit we'd passed on the first try. Didn't even care that the tape peeled a little paint off. I don't have wisdom to hand out. I'm not that kind of man, but I can tell you what I did. I chose the people who chose us. I paid back what I owed, and I built a life nobody can take apart. Has your family ever picked appearances over people? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.